Hi, and welcome to a tactical overview of the new Astra Militarum book. I played a game yesterday, you can see the battle report, and I've had a really good look through the book. It seems really amazing and really potential to be pretty top-notch, but there's also a lot of confusing elements which seem to overlap, and I've spent some time looking at two or three of those and looking at ways that I think could be used to make them work. Notably, they are Cadian, Catachan, and Mordian regiments. I haven't looked a lot at the others, but they seem to be some of the strong ones straight off the bat. So let's get into it and let's have a think about how these things can work. So straight off the bat, I've always liked Catachan as a close combat option. They seem really good for this at the moment. They can really lay down the pain with their long-range fire support with Sergeant Harker applying his reroll 1s to units within 6 inches. So you could have a fire base of Catachan heavy weapons. This does say reroll hits to a wound in the shooting phase for all friendly Catachan units within 6 inches of Sergeant Harker. So this applies to vehicles. This firebase could work really well because the Catachan Brutal Strength Regimental Doctrine allows you to re-roll the dice when determining the random number of hits. Now, with the Death of templates, this obviously is really relevant. So you could have a firebase of, say, Lament Russ or other tanks and sit there re-rolling ones to hit from Harker and then re-rolling the dice to determine how many hits you're going to have, how many shots you're going to have. So that potentially allows you a strong fire base for relatively cheap points. I mean, they are guardsmen after all. And then have a group of units which are going to go across the board. One of the major problems that we're going to probably keep coming back to is Astra Militarum lack for fast units, or obviously fast units. They do have fast units now, but they're not obviously strong, not obviously fast. So if it's a Maelstrom game, you're going to find it difficult to get across the board. And, you know, there's always that time you draw 3 cards and there's the objective is just out of sight on the other side of the board behind your enemy units, or just too far away, even clear in the open, but you just can't get there. So that's a big problem for Astra Militarum across the board. However, the other thing the Regimental Doctrine does is it adds 1 to the strength for all of the Astra Militarum troops which are Catachan in your armies. So potentially what you can do is, if you can get the guys across the table in big enough numbers, obviously they are still guardsmen, they're not combat heroes just because they've got +1 strength, they can actually kick out quite a lot of damage. So you can take units with power swords like command squads, the sergeants can take power swords, and then quite a lot of the characters can obviously take power swords as well. On top of that, you can take Colonel Ironhand Strachan, and he adds 1 to the attack characteristics of all units within 6 inches if they are Catachan. So obviously they're going to be Catachan. So then you've got 2 attacks per guardsman, potentially 20 guardsmen in 1 combat surrounding an enemy, each kicking out 2 attacks. Strength 4 for most of the guys. Potentially you take a Power Fist, go up to Strength 8, which is really great. The stratagem for Catachan is also pretty cool. If you put your tanks, for example, inside terrain, if you're fighting a close combat army, so I fought the Space Wolves yesterday, if they charge your tank, or any other unit for that matter, which is completely within terrain, for 1 command point you can do D3 mortal wounds on a 4+. So if you put your tanks, position them in terrain, they're pretty safe, and put heavy flamer on them, they get to stun and shoot, and then once they get charged, D3 mortal wounds, it could be pretty good. And I mean, you'll rack up command points for Astra Militarum. They're so good at that. On top of that, you can take obvious things like Bullgrins and Ogrins, which kick out heaps of attacks and pretty decent strength, and now with pretty good AP if you take the Bullgrin Maul. On top of that, what we have is obviously Valkyries, Vendettas, whichever way you want to look at them now, to take troops across the board. Now they're going to be in tens, but you can put 10 troops, a priest who also adds 1 to the attack characteristics, so potentially like 3 attacks per guardsman at strength 4. It becomes pretty tasty at that point. The other alternative is to take a Stormlord. Those 40 troop slots in there could be really good. Push it across the table. You can jump out with units of 10. On top of the units of 10, though, you could consolidate squads. For 1 command point, you can join infantry units together. This becomes really good with guardsmen hitting on 4s in combat. The other alternative, though, would be to take 2 units of conscripts and join them together, and then you've got huge units going in. Obviously, you want them supported by a commissar, so they're not being ground out too quickly. They're only hitting on 5s, but you can still make them strength 4 with the command. So potentially, they're just kicking out so many dice. You put Strachan, a priest, next to 40 conscripts. That's a lot of attacks they've got now. But that might be pushing things too far. I think sticking with guardsmen, essentially consolidating them, so you've got 20 guardsmen, 2 guys in there with power swords. That'd be pretty good. The other alternative would be to put in 1 Vendetta, will be a unit, a command squad with 4 and the sergeant, so 5 power weapons, and then the unit as ablative wounds. So you can put those in there. The thing that you kind of want to think about is that now in close combat, if you charge in with, say, a commissar and a unit, they can pick out the commissar quite easily because it's not joined into the unit. So you might want to charge the unit first, make sure you wrap around, and then the commissar can come in and attack from effectively the second rank. Obviously, the commissar allows you to effectively grind in a combat. Excuse me. So the commissar effectively allows you to grind in a combat. You're losing so few models from morale tests that you can then be there in a second and subsequent round. On top of that, you've got the fixed bayonets order. So the order can only be issued to units that are within 1 inch of an enemy unit. The ordered unit immediately fights as if it were the fight subphase. So you fight in the fight phase when you charge, or even allow yourself to be charged. Obviously, you can put quite a few flamers into a unit, allow yourself to be charged, kill some of the unit with flamers as they come in. Then you get to fight in their phase, survive because there's a commissar nearby. Then in your phase, you get to pile in with any other units. And then on top of that, the ordered unit fights in the shooting phase and in the fight phase, potentially with 3 attacks per man. Could make a heck of a mess. Okay, you need something to get through armor with those close combat attacks, but yeah, it's a really good option and brings something to the Astra Militarum that they've not had before. The unfortunate thing with this book is they have lost Rough Riders, which used to be a close combat option from before, but I think that they more than make up for it with those options. So close combat guard, it could be a thing of the future. Next, we'll get into the Cadians, probably the standard, certainly the standard look of guardsmen. No need to buy extra heads, just clip them off the sprue when they come. These guys, pretty good. They come with a doctrine which allows them to reroll 1s when they stand still, so become real marine killers if you get enough plasma guns in there, because you're wounding on 2s if you supercharge a plasma gun, and pretty unlikely to roll those double 1s, particularly in veteran squads when you're hitting on 3s. So yeah, they're really good, and I think Cadian, probably more than most, make a really great gun line. On top of that, Le Mans Rust tanks with their grinding advance rule, where they get to fire twice if they move less than half, which obviously includes standing still. But the Cadian tank order, which can be issued from tank commanders, and obviously Tank Commander Pass can issue 2 orders and is Cadian. They can re-roll a random determined dice with the tank. So if you sit still with a battle tank, you can re-roll a battle cannon. You can re-roll that d6, which is really great. If you watch the battle report, you'll also see I was a big fan of how the what are they called? The Hellhounds work now, especially with the Inferno Cannon kicking out 2d6 shots. So that's really great. It's going to be really powerful because it's quite fast. You can get in there and you can shoot off some infantry with those guys. It's also probably worth considering the Cadian specific warlord trait. If you issue an order, tank order or infantry order, and you get a 4+, you can immediately issue the same order within 6 inches. So if you've got a line of Le Mans Russes, you've got Pask sat in the middle, not only can you issue that order to 2 tanks and get them both firing with that extra d6 reroll, but even if you don't want to use a second order for that, you want to use it for something else, you can then issue it for free on a 4+. So really good potential use of those extra things. So really, really great for Cadians with that. The other thing that Le Mans Russes have with tank orders, which I think will be absolutely key, is if there any Le Mans Russ for any, not just Cadian, but any regiment wants to move and go and capture objectives, they count as objectives secured. So if you've got 10 models, 10 Gretchen holding an objective, obviously if you've got a tank army, that's going to be really hard to get 10 tanks there to compete for that. Not that killing 10 Gretchen would be particularly hard for a tank army, but anyway, what you can do is you can move 10 normally with a Le Mans Russ, you can then advance, and then you can move 10 again using a tank order. So you can go, and then you must advance within that. So potentially average 26, 27 inches, you can get across the board, and then your objective secure. Just park your tank next to the objective. What's really great about that is if there are models in the way, then you can shoot them out of the way with your tanks and then move in the shooting phase because it's an order. So really good for taking hold of objectives using those Le Mans Russ tanks. So we'll move on now to the Mordians. I've always liked these models. They're always great models, although there are pretty good alternatives out there. What they're really good for, if you're in a meta where there is characters around, they now have an order which allows you to fire rapid fire weapons straight at a character, as if you had sniper. Now, obviously, the big thing for guardsmen and rapid fire is the last gun, but probably if you're in a meta with lots of characters running around which are susceptible to last guns, I'd be quite surprised. But plasma guns, on the other hand, they're much more effective and much better. So yeah, get yourself lots of plasma guns on your Mordians. If you've got someone who's all the time just got a key character at the back of the board or behind his line who's just buffing those enemies and he's making the whole army tick, then you can now take this guy out. What's really handy, as I say, it's an order. There's not Mordian specific, but there's a Heirloom Conquest, the Laurels of Command, which if you put the order down on a 4+, you can immediately issue another order to the same unit. So this means that you can order a unit, which if you use your stratagem to link 2 units together, that could be 2 units of veterans, so that's potentially 8 plasma guns hitting on 3s. And then you can issue them the order to pick out a character, and then issue them the order to reroll 1s on a 4+. So that means you can overcharge pretty nicely. That's going to chew through some Space Marine characters pretty fast. So that's a really good use of that order, just combining them together to make them really powerful. The Mordian other issues, the warlord trait and the doctrine allows you better leadership, and if you flee on a 4+, you get to come back. So if you fail a morale test and die, flee, whatever, you don't go if you're on a 4+. So that can be really good, but I mean that always to me seems a bit negative. You're planning to fail leadership tests, you're planning to fail morale tests, so that doesn't seem a great strategy to me. If you are finding as a guard player that you are taking an awful lot of morale tests, but still sticking in the game, then maybe Mordian's the group for you to keep in there and keep fighting. The one that I do think is really useful is as part of the regimental doctrine, if you're within 1 inch, you get to overwatch with +1 to hit. So that works again for vehicles if they're within 3 inches of another vehicle and they're getting charged. So potentially what you could do is with the stratagem defensive gunners, you could get +1 to hit, or you're hitting on 5. So that means you're hitting on 4s with overwatch. So there's all sorts of tanks with lots of guns, and obviously you can add heavy bolters and such to sponsons, and this could be really good. So you allow yourself to get charged, and then because you're Mordian, you've got a line of Le Mans Russes or whatever, they can fire Overwatch hitting on 4s. So essentially that unit, you could bait them into charging you and then just decimate them with your unit. The other thing that looks really good with Mordians is to take big units, and then you've got volley fire, which is the Mordian specific order, which means on a 6+, when you roll to hit, you get to shoot again. So yeah, it could be pretty useful if you've got a big unit. Otherwise, I think it's a bit situational. You might, not roll any 6s if you're just rolling 10 last gun shots or whatever. Not brilliant, but if you've got 2 veteran squads and you're firing, 8 plasma guns rapid fire, then that's 16 shots. You're going to hit some 6s and get some free plasma gun shots. So at that point, I think that could be really useful. But I can see Mordians and Cadians forming a big gun line, maybe with some Le Mans Russes weirdly to zoom over the board with those tank orders to claim objectives. But I think it would be really interesting to see if someone can make Catachans work, really taking the fight to the enemy, looking at jumping in and either through conventional transport, chimeras and such, or I'd really like to see someone zooming in with some Valkyries, or even taking a really big Stormlord, putting 40 guys in there, or 20 guys and some Ogryns or Bullgryns, and really running across the board and scaring some Tau players by leaping out in their backline and giving them a good scare with some Imperial Guard combat power, fix those bayonets and charge. Anyway, comment below with any suggestions. If you want me to do this again with the other regiments, then let me know, that'd be awesome. Or I could do one for the Elysian drop troops, particularly if I can make them work and get some models together. But yeah, comment below, subscribe to the channel, and thanks for listening.